Thank you. Mr. Gallagher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Jordan, it's an honor to be here. This is my first time testifying before the committee. It's
Welcome.
very nice room you have. I'm envious of it and look forward to working with you on many issues. I'd like to speak briefly on some of the bills I've introduced that I would appreciate being considered here on the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. But this morning I want to focus on just one, H.R. 765, the Serve the People, Not the Swamp Act. The goal of this bill is to get Congress working again and to incentivize members to direct their efforts away from the swamp we call Washington, D.C. in a few simple steps. I think that most people, or rather in this body, we don't need a 700-page piece of legislation to make this place serve the American people better. I think we can do a few simple, easy-to-understand things to change the entire paradigm. To preface my discussion of the bill, let me say I understand that many other members of Congress may take issue with some of my bill's provisions. I understand I am only in my second term in Congress, but I think a lot of us come here with a sense that we need to sort of change the way business as usual is done in D.C., and then we never seem to get around to actually doing just that. We do things the same way and expect a different outcome, and that satisfies the literal definition of insanity. So to avoid that, I think the first thing we need to do, and this is the first section of the Serve the People, Not the Swamp Act, is to prohibit congressional recesses until Congress adopts a concurrent resolution on the budget that results in a balanced federal budget by the last fiscal year covered by the resolution. I think actually that would get at some of the issues my colleague Mr. Kilmer identified. And simply, this would keep us from kicking the budget can down the road each year and would be one way to stop Congress from governing by crisis or from crisis to crisis. And while you may think the particular approach contained in H.R. 765 is not the way to go, I'm sure we can all agree that our current budget process is broken. My Democratic colleague just spoke eloquently to that fact, and it makes no sense to the people who elected us that we should go on vacation when we have not resolved these budget issues. The second part of H.R. 765 would enact a 5-year ban on lobbying by high-ranking executive branch officials and members of Congress. Again, I'm still relatively new to Congress, but I've been here long enough to learn that basically every member is smart, hardworking, and most are here for good reasons. This is true of most senior-level executive branch appointees. Surely we're all capable, in light of that, of going home and embarking on another successful adventure after our time in office. We could start a business, we could become a professor, we could manage a charitable organization, or many other things. Why then do so many of our colleagues choose to lobby once they move on? And what kind of perverse incentives are imparted on us during our time in office by the prospect of cashing in for a lucrative lobbying job when we leave? While there is some opposition to this kind of revolving door ban on both sides of the aisle, taming the revolving door does enjoy bipartisan support. There's Democratic support in the House and the Senate, and I believe this is a common-sense target for reform for voters across the ideological spectrum. Finally, the third part of H.R. 765 would terminate further retirement coverage for members of Congress under the Federal Employee Retirement System. This is a reform in the vein of the previously mentioned lobbying ban. To get Congress working for Americans again, we must examine the incentives we give to members. In other words, there should be no incentive to stay here for as long as possible to collect a more generous pension, one that insulates us from life outside Washington, D.C. This should not be a job we aim to stay in forever, merely a season of service that we expend all of our energy on behalf of the people we represent, and then we go home and return to our previous life. And so these are 3 simple steps I believe we can take to change the incentive structure through which Congress operates. And ultimately, again, I just would say I respect everyone who disagrees with me and who certainly people have been here for longer than I, but until we change the way Congress operates, I suspect every 2 years we're going to have people on both sides making the exact same arguments about how we drain the swamp, how we change Congress, and then they come here with good intentions and then somehow nothing ever changes. And to expect different outcomes is patently absurd. Or, and this is even more destructive over the long term, we put all our hopes on the executive branch, presidential elections. We seem to surrender all of our authority to executive branch officials without jealously guarding our own and doing things the way we should be doing it here in the most powerful, what should be the most powerful branch of government, Article 1. And so I thank you for letting me go on. It's an honor to be here, and I hope you will consider H.R. 765, the Serve the People, Not the Swamp Act. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gallagher. please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gallagher, thank you for coming. So I just want to make sure I understand point one of your three-point piece of legislation. You would say we get sworn in on January 3rd. We don't leave until there's a budget passed by both the House and the Senate, which actually shows a path to deal with this $22 trillion debt situation we have.
Essentially.
That's good. I mean, you look at the debt problem we have. You look at what it's now costing us to service that debt in interest payments a year, over $300 billion. Maybe that makes some sense. Now, obviously, Congress, I guess, you could pass that law, but then they could change the law and say, well, we're going to amend it, and we're going to go home and not deal with it. But at least it puts some marker down that says we should take this seriously and stick around until we can agree, Republicans and Democrats, House and Senate, on getting a path to some kind of fiscal sanity. So I applaud the gentleman for his entire legislation, but certainly the first part, which is a big problem that we're going to have to address sooner or later. And like most problems in life, the sooner you get about fixing it, the easier it is to solve. So I thank the gentleman for coming today and presenting his legislation.
Thank you, sir. As my grandpa used to say, problems don't age well. That's as true in politics as it is in your personal life.
Thank you very much. We have a vote coming up. Ms. Plaskett, we're going to hear you, and then I'm going to adjourn. You don't have anything? All right, fine. We will